And now you'll understand why I never lost.
Bear with me because this story goes back 10 years, and it's been quite the journey that I never saw coming. Sometimes life throws you curveballs that completely change everything you thought you knew about yourself and the people you trust most. Back in college, I had this best friend. Let's call him Marcus. We were absolutely inseparable, like actual brothers who'd been through everything together since freshman year. Late-night study sessions fueled by instant ramen and way too much caffeine, weekend adventures exploring every corner of the city, endless conversations about how we were going to conquer the business world together and become these legendary entrepreneurs. You know how it is when you're young and naive and think you've got life completely figured out, when everything seems possible and betrayal feels impossible. Marcus was the kind of guy everyone gravitated toward. Charismatic, confident, always had the best stories to tell at parties. I genuinely looked up to him in a lot of ways, and considered him not just my best friend, but basically family. We'd talk about being each other's best men someday, how our kids would grow up together, all those dreams young men have about lifelong brotherhood. I was also engaged to this incredible woman, Jessica. She was literally everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Drop-dead gorgeous with these striking green eyes, brilliantly smart in ways that constantly impressed me, fiercely ambitious with plans to climb the corporate ladder. I was head over heels in love and convinced we had our entire future perfectly mapped out together. The wedding planning was in full swing. We'd already put deposits down on venues, picked out rings, the whole 9 yards. Marcus was obviously going to be my best man, and I genuinely couldn't imagine life without either of them in it. We'd all hang out together constantly. Movie nights at my apartment, double dates when Marcus was seeing someone, study groups where Jessica would help us both with our business courses. Looking back, I realized there were probably signs I missed, little moments of eye contact or inside jokes that should have tipped me off. But when you trust people completely, you don't look for betrayal hiding in plain sight. Then one cold evening in November, Jessica drops this absolute bomb on me out of nowhere. We're sitting in her dorm room, and she's acting weird all day, fidgeting and avoiding eye contact. Finally, she takes this deep breath and her voice starts trembling as she forces out the words, "There's something I need to tell you. It's about Marcus. I think I'm falling in love with him." My brain literally couldn't process what she'd just said at first. Like, surely I must have misheard something because this couldn't possibly be real. I actually asked her to repeat herself because the words just wouldn't compute in my head. But nope. She was dead serious, and the look of guilt and pain in her eyes told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been going on. The betrayal hit me like a freight train at full speed. This wasn't just losing my fiancé. This was losing my brother, my best friend, the person I trusted with absolutely everything, including my deepest fears and insecurities. They tried to explain it away with some complete BS about how it just happened, and they didn't mean for it to happen this way, and how they fought against their feelings for months, as if that somehow made the weeks or months of deception and lies acceptable or forgivable. Jessica kept crying and saying she was sorry, that she never wanted to hurt me, that she wished things were different. But the damage was done. The person I'd planned to spend my life with had been emotionally cheating with my best friend, and apparently they thought their feelings justified destroying everything we'd built together. The worst part? Marcus never even bothered reaching out to explain or apologize or face me like a man. Complete radio silence. No phone calls, no texts, no showing up at my door to try to make things right. I guess he figured I'd eventually come crawling to him for answers or closure. But my pride absolutely wouldn't let me give him that satisfaction. I wasn't going to beg for explanations from someone who'd stabbed me in the back. I ended things with Jessica immediately. Didn't matter how much she cried or begged or promised, it was all a terrible mistake she'd take back if she could. Some betrayals you just don't recover from. Period. I gave her back the engagement ring, packed up all her stuff from my apartment, and told her we were done forever. She kept calling for weeks afterward, but I never answered. The next few months were honestly the darkest period of my entire life. I felt like my whole world had collapsed overnight. Not only had I lost the woman I loved, but I'd also lost my best friend and had to completely rebuild my social circle. A lot of our mutual friends didn't know what to do or say, and some of them ended up taking sides or just avoiding the drama entirely. I completely threw myself into work and school after that. Figured if I couldn't trust people with my heart, at least I could trust my own determination and ambition to create something meaningful. Worked absolutely insane hours, stayed in the library until they kicked me out, Networked like my life depended on it, took every single opportunity that came my way, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed. Turns out pain makes excellent fuel when you channel it correctly, instead of letting it destroy you. The early days after graduation were absolutely brutal. I started my own company working out of this cramped office, barely bigger than a closet, surviving on caffeine and pure stubborn determination. Some days I'd work 16 hours straight, fueled by this burning need to prove that I could build something incredible without them. Every small victory felt absolutely monumental. Signing my first real client, securing initial funding, landing a decent project that paid actual money. It all reminded me that my future belonged entirely to me, not to them or anyone else. Meanwhile, I'd occasionally hear updates about Marcus and Jessica through mutual friends who didn't know any better, or thought enough time had passed that I'd want to know. They apparently got engaged about 6 months after our breakup, which honestly felt like another slap in the face. Big fancy wedding in some exotic Caribbean location that probably cost more than most people make in a year. Expensive mansion in the suburbs with a 3-car garage, luxury vehicles, elaborate European vacations. They looked absolutely perfect on social media. You know the type. Always posting these carefully curated glimpses of their supposedly amazing life with captions about being blessed and living the dream. But I stopped paying attention pretty quickly because their success or happiness had absolutely nothing to do with mine, and I refused to let their existence dictate my emotional state or self-worth. I unfollowed them on everything, asked mutual friends to stop giving me updates, and focused entirely on building my own life. By year 3, I'd moved out of that tiny office and into a proper workspace downtown. By year 5, my company had completely outgrown that space too. I moved into this sleek, modern office with glass walls and panoramic city views that screamed success to anyone who visited. But it wasn't just about appearances. I'd built something genuinely substantial and lasting that was making real money and solving real problems for clients. Industry leaders started knowing my name and seeking my opinion on market trends. Invitations to exclusive networking events became routine. Partnerships with major brands were suddenly the norm rather than pipe dreams. I was featured in business magazines, invited to speak at conferences, asked to mentor young entrepreneurs. The success felt surreal sometimes, like I was living someone else's life. Yet my personal life remained deliberately quiet and guarded. People constantly asked why I wasn't married, or even seriously dating anyone, especially as I got into my early 30s. I'd laugh it off with vague responses like, I'm married to my work, or haven't found the right person yet, or too busy building an empire. The truth was that trust didn't come easily anymore after what Marcus and Jessica had done to me. I'd had relationships over the years, some lasting several months, but I always kept people at arm's length emotionally. The moment someone got too close or started talking about the future, I'd find reasons to pull back or end things. It wasn't fair to them, but I couldn't help it. The scars from that betrayal ran deeper than I wanted to admit. Fast forward 10 years total from the original betrayal. I've built this incredible company from absolutely nothing, and it's thriving beyond my wildest early dreams. We've got offices in 3 cities, over 200 employees, an annual revenue that would have seemed impossible back in that tiny first office. I'm genuinely respected in my industry, financially secure in ways I never imagined possible, the whole package that younger me dreamed about achieving. But yeah, I'm still technically single at this point, though that's about to change in ways I couldn't have predicted. Trust issues will definitely do that to you, but sometimes the universe has other plans. Then, I get this utterly unexpected invitation to the Summit of Innovators. Basically, the most exclusive business retreat you can possibly imagine. Only the absolute top tier of entrepreneurs and industry leaders get invited to this thing. We're talking Fortune 500 CEOs, tech moguls, venture capitalists who control billions in funding, people whose names you'd recognize from magazine covers. It's the kind of event I used to dream about attending someday when I was starting out. And now here I was, actually part of that elite circle. The invitation itself was this beautiful embossed thing with gold lettering that screamed prestige and exclusivity. Reading through the details, I saw it was a week-long retreat at some exclusive mountain resort, with access to top-tier networking opportunities and discussions led by some of the most influential minds in business. The kind of event that could open doors to partnerships and opportunities I hadn't even imagined yet. I'll admit I hesitated for a few days before accepting. These kinds of gatherings often felt like elaborate performances, where people posture and inflate their successes like peacocks in a mating ritual. I wasn't sure I wanted to subject myself to that kind of environment. But the potential benefits were too significant to ignore, and my assistant kept pushing me to go. The resort was absolutely incredible when I arrived. Breathtaking mountain views in every direction. 5-star accommodations that made luxury hotels look shabby. Staff who somehow knew my name and preferences before I even checked in. It was the complete luxury experience that screamed serious money and influence at every turn. The first evening was a casual welcome reception where attendees could mingle and set the tone for the week ahead. I entered this grand hall filled with elegant people in perfectly tailored suits and designer dresses worth more than cars. Conversations buzzed around me like a symphony of power and influence. Everyone networking and making deals over champagne that probably cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries. I was having this fascinating conversation with a venture capitalist about emerging markets when I heard this painfully familiar voice behind me saying something like, "Is that really who I think it is?" My blood went cold for just a second before I turned around slowly. And there they were. Marcus and Jessica, looking noticeably older but still desperately trying to project that same polished perfection I remembered from their social media posts. Marcus had put on some weight and was definitely balding, though he was trying to hide it with an expensive haircut. Jessica still looked good, but there was something tired in her eyes, like she was working harder to maintain her appearance than it used to take. The absolute shock on their faces was genuinely priceless. They clearly hadn't expected to see me there, especially not as an actual invited participant rather than someone who'd snuck in. This was supposed to be their world, their level of success, and seeing me there completely threw them off balance. Marcus recovers first with that old arrogant smirk I remember so well, though it seemed more forced than it used to be. "Well, well. Didn't expect to see you here," he says, extending his hand like we're old buddies catching up instead of former friends who hadn't spoken in a decade due to his betrayal. I keep it completely cool and professional, shake his hand firmly but not aggressively, just nod politely and say something about how it's been a long time. But I can absolutely tell they're both completely thrown off and struggling to process this new reality. This isn't the broken, devastated guy they left behind a decade ago, and they're having trouble reconciling that with their mental image of me. Jessica finally finds her voice and says something polite about how good I look and how successful I seem. There's this awkward moment where none of us quite knows what to say, the weight of unspoken history hanging heavy between us like a storm cloud. Over the next couple days, I don't avoid them, but I don't seek them out either. I'm here for business, not to relitigate decade-old drama. I bury myself in panel discussions, workshops, and networking sessions that are genuinely valuable for my company's growth. Every interaction feels like a step further into the elite circles I'd worked so hard to enter. But Marcus keeps finding opportunities to insert himself into my conversations or sit near me during events. He's clearly trying to assert his dominance in these painfully obvious ways, constantly talking about his corporate success, their exotic travels, their supposedly perfect life together. He mentions their house in the Hamptons, their European vacations, Amanda's charity work, his recent promotion to senior vice president. It's all very calculated, like he's trying to make me feel inferior or jealous. Then comes the real kicker during a coffee break on the third day. I'm standing near the buffet table chatting with a fellow entrepreneur about potential collaborations when Marcus walks over with Jessica trailing slightly behind him. He waits for a lull in the conversation before inserting himself with that trademark fake charm. The other entrepreneur excuses himself politely, leaving me alone with them. Marcus looks me up and down with this condescending expression that brings back all the old feelings of irritation, then delivers what he clearly thinks is a devastating blow. "You know, it's funny running into you here. Jessica and I were just talking about how far we've all come since college. It's really impressive what you've achieved, truly. Still single, though, right? I suppose it's probably easier to focus on work when you don't have the distractions of actual family life and real relationships. Just look at my beautiful wife here. Gorgeous, wealthy, happy, successful in her own right. Poor you, still all alone after all these years. Some things never change, I guess." The sheer condescension in his voice was absolutely unreal, dripping with fake sympathy and obvious superiority. Like he was genuinely pitying me for not measuring up to his standard of what constitutes real success and happiness in life. Jessica looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything to stop him. That's when I smiled calmly and said, "Actually, I'd love for you both to meet my wife as well." The look on both their faces was absolutely priceless and worth every moment of awkwardness leading up to it. Marcus literally froze mid-smirk like someone had just slapped him across the face, and Jessica went completely pale. They clearly thought I was either lying outright or bluffing desperately to save face in front of them. I politely excused myself to make a quick phone call, really just stepped outside to let the tension and anticipation build throughout the room, while giving myself a moment to compose before the big reveal. When I came back a few minutes later, the entire atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Word spreads incredibly fast in these exclusive circles, and suddenly everyone was intensely curious about who exactly I'd married and why I'd been so secretive about it. Then she walked in, and the entire room just stopped breathing. My wife isn't just successful, she's a legitimate powerhouse in our industry, and several others. The kind of person whose name carries serious weight in boardrooms across multiple countries and continents. When she entered that room with her characteristic confidence and poise, conversations literally stopped mid-sentence. People immediately recognized her and started whispering excitedly among themselves about her recent business deals, her company's IPO, her appearances on major news networks as an expert commentator. She moved through the crowd with this magnetic presence that drew everyone's attention without her having to demand it. People were breaking away from their own conversations just to get a chance to speak with her or shake her hand. I walked over confidently, took her hand with quiet pride, and introduced her to the assembled crowd. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my wife, Catherine." The thunderous applause that followed wasn't for me. It was entirely for her and her incredible reputation and achievements. She's that universally respected and admired in business circles. Marcus and Jessica looked like they'd just witnessed their entire world crumble before their eyes. Their perfect little bubble of superiority had been completely and utterly shattered in the most public way possible. Here was someone who didn't just match their success. She completely eclipsed everything they'd accomplished combined, and she was mine. Catherine handled the introduction with her usual grace, charming everyone while making it clear why she was considered one of the most influential business people of her generation. She wasn't just beautiful, though she absolutely was. She was brilliant, accomplished, and commanded respect in ways that money alone could never buy. The rest of the retreat was absolutely fascinating to observe from a psychological perspective. All of Marcus's trademark arrogance just evaporated overnight like morning mist. Jessica could barely make eye contact with anyone anymore, her usual confidence replaced by obvious discomfort. Their whole carefully constructed dynamic changed completely, and you could see the cracks forming in their supposedly perfect facade. During various conversations over the following days, I started overhearing fragments that revealed the truth about their situation. Jessica complaining to someone about how the deals aren't coming in like they used to, and how the pressure at home is absolutely suffocating. Marcus looking genuinely stressed and fidgety instead of his usual confident self, checking his phone constantly like he was expecting bad news. Their marriage clearly had serious problems beneath the surface that all the luxury vacations and expensive cars couldn't fix. The foundation they'd built their relationship on, taking someone else's happiness, apparently wasn't as solid as they'd hoped. But here's the thing that surprised me. I didn't feel vindicated or triumphant the way I thought I would after all these years. If anything, I felt genuinely sorry for them. They'd built their entire happiness on taking something from someone else. And now they were seeing what actual authentic success looked like when it's built on solid foundations. On the final day, I gave the keynote speech about resilience and the importance of letting go of past grievances to move forward. I talked about how betrayal can either completely destroy you or forge you into something infinitely stronger than you were before, how the choice is ultimately yours to make. The response was incredible and deeply moving, with people coming up afterward to share their own stories of overcoming adversity. Marcus actually approached me after the speech and offered what seemed like a genuinely sincere apology. His usual bravado was completely gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. He said that seeing me there, seeing what I'd built and who I'd become, made him realize what kind of person he'd actually been back then, and how his actions had consequences he'd never fully considered. Jessica was literally crying as she talked about how they'd completely lost themselves when they betrayed me, how their relationship had been built on such shaky ground that it never really recovered from the guilt and knowledge of how it started. I accepted their apologies gracefully because holding on to anger and resentment wasn't serving me anymore and was honestly exhausting. But I also made it crystal clear that their current struggles weren't my responsibility to fix or solve. I'd completely moved on with my life, and they needed to figure out their own path forward without expecting anything from me. The retreat ended with Marcus and Jessica leaving very quietly and separately. Apparently, they'd had some kind of major fight the night before that everyone was whispering about. Meanwhile, Catherine and I stayed to enjoy the final evening together, talking excitedly about our upcoming projects and plans for expanding both our companies. Looking back now, I genuinely realize that their betrayal was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in the long run. It forced me to become someone I never would have been otherwise. Stronger, more self-reliant, more ambitious. Marcus and Jessica thought they were stealing my future and leaving me with nothing. But they were actually giving me the motivation and fire to build something infinitely better than anything I'd originally planned. Catherine and I have been together for 5 amazing years now, married for 3. We met through work when she was looking for a strategic partner for one of her ventures, and what started as a professional relationship gradually became something much deeper. She's not just my spouse, she's my best friend, business partner, intellectual equal, and the most brilliant person I know. The life we've created together makes that old relationship with Jessica look like amateur hour by comparison. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Marcus and Jessica hadn't betrayed me. Would I have settled for a comfortable but unremarkable life? Would I have become complacent and never pushed myself to reach my full potential? Would I have married Jessica and spent decades wondering what else was possible? I'll never know for sure, but I'm genuinely grateful for the path my life actually took. The crazy part is that Marcus and Jessica probably thought their betrayal was the dramatic end of my story, that they'd broken me permanently and I'd never recover. Instead, it turned out to be just the beginning of a much better, more fulfilling, and more successful chapter than anything I could have imagined at 22. The aftermath of that retreat was honestly more dramatic than the event itself. Within hours of leaving, several people reached out to me directly, some expressing amazement at how I'd handled the situation, others curious about the history between us. Apparently, word had spread about the tension and the reveal. What really surprised me was getting a long email from Marcus about 2 weeks later. It was this rambling, emotional message where he basically laid out everything that had been going wrong in his life. Turns out their perfect marriage was falling apart. Had been for years, actually. Their finances were a mess despite appearances, and his job was on shaky ground. He talked about how seeing me at the retreat had been this wake-up call, how guilt had eaten away at him over the years, and how their relationship had never felt authentic because it was built on betrayal. The email was honestly pathetic, but also seemed genuine in a way his in-person apology hadn't. I showed it to Catherine, and her response was direct. He's looking for absolution from you because he can't forgive himself. That's not your job. She was right. I wrote back a brief response wishing him well, but making it clear I wasn't interested in becoming his therapist. About a month later, I heard Marcus and Jessica had separated. Apparently, the retreat had been their last attempt to save their marriage. When that didn't work, everything collapsed. Their divorce was messy and public within their social circles. The whole ugly spectacle that happens when people built their lives on shaky foundations finally face reality. Honestly, hearing about their problems didn't bring satisfaction. If anything, it reinforced how grateful I was for what Catherine and I had built together. Our relationship was based on mutual respect and genuine partnership, not on taking something from someone else. The connections from the retreat proved incredibly valuable. 3 major partnerships came out of conversations from that week. More importantly, the experience gave me closure I didn't know I needed. For years, I'd carried low-level resentment and curiosity about them. Seeing their facade crumble answered those questions definitively. Catherine and I used the momentum to launch a joint venture combining our expertise. Our wedding had been small and private, just family and close friends at a vineyard in Napa Valley. Nothing like the elaborate spectacle Marcus and Jessica had thrown. We wanted something authentic rather than impressive. Looking back, that experience taught me something important about success and happiness. Marcus and Jessica had achieved wealth and status, but built it on betrayal and deception. When that foundation cracked, everything tumbled down. Catherine and I built our relationship on solid ground: honesty, respect, shared goals. When challenges came, we had strength to weather them together. The retreat made me realize how much I'd grown since that devastating betrayal. The young man crushed by his best friend's treachery had evolved into someone who could face that person with confidence and grace. I didn't need revenge anymore because I'd already won by becoming who I was meant to be. Sometimes people ask if I'd change anything, knowing what I know now. The honest answer is no. That betrayal set me on a path that led to everything I value most today. Without it, I might have settled for less, might never have met Catherine. There's something poetic about how the universe works. Marcus and Jessica thought they were taking my future away, but they were actually clearing the path for something infinitely better. Update. About Catherine's reaction to all this drama and whether she knew about my history with them. She actually figured out exactly who Marcus and Jessica were before I even told her the full story. She's incredibly perceptive and could sense the tension and history immediately just from watching our interactions. Her take on the whole situation was refreshingly straightforward. You don't owe them anything. Not explanations, not forgiveness, nothing. You've moved on completely and built something beautiful. That's all that matters now. She's amazing like that. Practical, supportive, and completely secure in herself and our relationship. Second update. A lot of people who will be asking about what happened to Marcus and Jessica after their divorce. From what I've heard, Marcus ended up taking a lower-level position at a different company after some issues at his old job came to light during the divorce proceedings. Jessica moved back to her hometown and is apparently working in real estate now. They both seem to be trying to rebuild their lives separately, which honestly is probably the best thing for both of them. I don't keep tabs on them actively, but word occasionally filters back through mutual acquaintances. Last I heard, Marcus was in therapy and trying to make amends with people he'd wronged over the years. Jessica seems to be focusing on her career and staying out of serious relationships for now. I genuinely hope they both find peace and happiness eventually, just not at anyone else's expense this time. Life has this funny way of balancing things out eventually. Call it karma, call it justice, or just call it the natural result of hard work, integrity, and building authentic relationships. Either way, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I wouldn't change a thing about how it all worked out.